Bit Studios.
And the first damn play he wrote, my entrance is walking in with a silver tray filled with teacups. And she said, I'm on stage rattling like a freight train. And I just got so mad at him.
In our last episode, we heard Doug recap on his early years, straight from the pacifier to the stage.
In 6th grade, I rewrote Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for 27. You'd find 27 roles in Snow White. I actually had 8 dwarfs. I wrote it, and the king did not die. He died eventually, but I was the king. And I had the cutest girl, Letty Lee Harnden, was my handmaiden, who brought me this beautiful chort to eat. And then I died. But it was a lovely part, and I was like thinking I was the king.
We've all been there, growing up, imagining what it would be like to have been switched at birth, torrid love affair gone awry, only to discover you're related to fame and fortune.
I always thought, too, that I was really a brother to Prince Charles when he was born, and one day they would call from the palace and say, you are the real heir, and come on over and run the country. Well, I wasn't going to run the country. I was going to have a wonderful time with all that wealth.
The following podcast is about the life and times of Doug Felch. Doug lives in wonderful St. Louis, Missouri, and has traveled about during his career. Who is Doug? And what can we learn from him? From rags to riches? Well, as Doug says, enriched human, not wealthy, but wealthy and not in the monetary sense. So you could say rags to rags, but wealthy in mind and spirit. Puppeteer by day, and well, by night. How did it all come to be? Here is Doug in our next episode in Doug's Life. Doug had many nervous moments early on in theater, and could not do it without the help of wonderful, inspiring instructors.
Who was our teacher primeval? Her name was Merle Boweevil. This woman was just horrible. And one day she hated anyone chewing gum in her classroom. So one day I got 27 grape gum balls and handed them out to everybody. We closed the door and we're all chewing madly. And when she walked in the door, she kind of screamed. And then my name. It was worth the look on her face. I mean, and we were getting sick from the smell of all that grape gum in the classroom. College was interesting. Majored in English and psychology with a minor in speech and theater arts. And then I had hyperactive thyroid and had that removed. And the doctor said, don't go back to college. He said, I don't know, you were running degrees from having a stroke. But I was at 160 pounds and smoked and drank like there was no tomorrow. And then in the back of my head, it's so funny when I think back of those days, I felt I was never going to live very long. And that didn't happen. Here I am. But I had a fabulous time. And then, as luck would have it, because of the thyroidectomy, went to the doctor. I was seeing him once a month after the surgery. And he said, well, you look kind of sad today. I said, well, I just got a draft notice. And, of course, it was Vietnam and all that. And he said, do you have an undying wish to go to Vietnam? And I said, I feel I'm very patriotic, but, I don't see this for me. He said, I'll be right back. And he comes back a few minutes later with a letter. Give this to the draft board. And he wrote a letter saying that I was his patient and I would be under his care for the next 5 years. And so a gift, because I've lost a few friends in Vietnam, and that could have been me as well if it wasn't for Dr. Lyndon C., the most famous thyroid man in the Midwest. He's a great guy. So I didn't go back to school. A friend of mine got a job with a puppet show. He said, "Oh, I'm going to go on tour." And I said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'd love to do it." He said, "You know, one guy in the show isn't working out very well, and they're probably going to let him go after the first tour." And I said, "Oh, yeah, like that's going to happen." The next day I get a call. "You're coming into work tomorrow with me for an interview." I said, "What?" "They fired the guy." I said, "What?" In the show Pinocchio, there's a scene in the Enchanted Forest, and the finale, there are 10 marionettes on stage doing this wild dance. At the end of the number, they exit, and the first puppeteer hangs off his marionettes, takes the second set of marionettes, hangs them off, and he keeps taking them away so the other puppeteers could get back to the other marionettes in the show. Well, the guy who wasn't working out was the first guy off. He couldn't get his marionettes hung off, and people kept coming and kept handing him. And then the star of the show, Bobby Clark, said, "Get over here, I need you." He says, "I can't." He said, "Just drop everything and come over here." And this tremendous crash, all 10 lollygogs were on the floor. He was fired, I was hired, and went on tour. And traveled all over the United States and Canada. Actors say it all the time, I think. I can't believe I'm being paid for doing this. It was so rewarding, so fulfilling. And then in 1968, we can just jump ahead. There's so many stories about being on tour.
There's a saying, when one door closes, other doors open. Or, well, at least for Doug, it was picking which door to go through. Along the way, he would have wonderful celebrity encounters, no matter how awkward the situation was presented.
Oh, Sylvia Sidney, I forgot. I told the story about Sylvia Sidney in Kansas City. She was doing a show very late in her career. She was quite elderly doing this role. And the sequence was the house lights would dim, the curtains would part, the lights would come up, and Sylvia Sidney sitting on a chaise lounge next to a telephone. And then the audience is going to applaud, and then after the applause, the phone would ring, and she would pick up the phone and start the play. Well, the house lights dimmed, the curtains parted, the lights came up, Sylvia was on the chaise lounge, and there was no applause. And there was no applause. And there was no applause. The prop man promptly rang the phone. And they still wonder why he is alive, because she gave him a look from stage. Like, "Don't ring the phone again." And he didn't. Still there's silence. And finally she turned to the audience and says, "I can wait as long as you can." And the applause started. And then the phone rang and the show went on. So I walk into the lobby of the DuPont Hotel, and it was just grand. This huge ceilings and chandeliers and beautiful furniture. And across the room, there was Gloria Swanson. And I said, "Oh, gosh, I've got to talk to her." And I started a beeline towards her, and I swear she sensed me coming. I mean, not that I was pushing people out of the way, but I was right hell-bent on getting to her. And she turns and looks at me. And I said, "Oh, Miss Swanson, I have a picture of you standing on the ruins of the Roxy Theater with your arms up to the sky. I'll never forget that day," she said. "I was standing there in the sun streaming down on me, and all these young gay men picking up bricks as souvenirs. It was absolutely one of the most inspiring moments of my life." And I'm like, I wasn't breathing. And someone called to her, and she turned away. And I almost screamed, because she turned into this little old lady. The minute I was not locked eye to eye with her, the illusion was definitely broken. But it was still a moment I'll never forget. We had a guy, he was a little older than the rest of us, and he was kind of the den mother. "Don't do this, don't do that. You're representing this company, and you can't be doing crazy stuff." Yes, Richard, okay. And so we're at the King Charles Hotel in Toronto, and Ethel Merman was there doing the last tour of Annie Get Your Gun, which we did go see at the O'Keefe Center. But we're standing there at the elevator, the door is open, and there's Ethel Merman. And we're like, oh gosh, like high school girls, just, oh. And we got on the elevator, and Richard just looked at us like, just don't do anything. And the doors start to close, and he turns to her and says, "Miss Hepburn, it's an honor to meet you." We thought we were gonna die, but we got, we did get through it, I'll tell you. And it was an interesting staging of that Annie Get Your Gun, because, you know, she was an old lady. She really was. But boy, that voice, oi, oi, oi. And then meeting Carl Reiner, oh God, he's just such an icon in comedy and just in the show I seem to remember so much as a child was our Show of Shows with Sid Caesar, Imogen Coca, and the group. And I was in an airport, and I saw him, and hi. I said, "Oh, I enjoy your work so much." He says, "Thank you." He says, "But I have to pee." And I said, "Oh, okay." I still don't believe this. I followed him into the restroom and stood next to the urinal with him, and he kept looking at me. It was only eye contact, trust me. But it was just the thought of, you know, getting every moment with him, even if it was standing at a urinal. But oh, I tell you, the memories of people and where you met them and how. And then, of course, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was just so, what a man. I mean, so debonair. He was on tour with The Pleasure of His Company, was the name of the show. And our tours kept coinciding. We were playing the same cities at the same time. So we do all the morning shows together. And so after the second morning show, of course, I lied to him. I told him I was named after him, but it was Douglas MacArthur. But that's beside the point. But such a gentleman. I mean, and I so wanted to ask him what it was like being married to Joan Crawford, and I just knew, don't go there. It's not going to be a good thing. And of course, then playing the National Theater in Washington, and the Kennedys coming backstage. Jimmy Carter was president when we played Atlanta. He was not president, he was governor. And so they have a picture of me standing. I said, "Oh, here, you know, the puppets, Mr. Carter, you stand here." I climbed up on his desk with the marionette and had the marionette next to him. And it's this fabulous picture of the two of us. And then we donated a performance for his favorite charity, which was handicapped children. And then they came to the theater and saw the show, and it was amazing. And meeting the Salzburg Marionettes, and oh gosh, in Boston. They were on tour at the same time, and everybody was in a big hurry this one day, and they're running out of the theater like it was on fire. The cast, I mean. And then these people came backstage, and with very heavy German accents, and said, could we see backstage? Oh, yes, come on. And then they introduced themselves, and luckily I recognized the name. And Frau Eicher was there, and I went up 25 feet in the air to the top of the scaffolding and worked some of the marionettes. And then I became Finley Fairweather, the fox. And he came off stage to her and put his arms around her, and she hugged him. And she goes to the fox, "You are a very bad boy." And then she stopped and looked up 25 feet. "No, you are a very bad boy." I'll never forget that. And then they had us come to see their show and let us work their marionettes, which were just exquisite. They were smaller, and I was used to, the puppets were billed as life-size. They were quite large, but the Salzburg marionettes were about 18 inches. And when I was working them, they looked almost spastic because they, you just had to be very subtle with them. And then one guy in the troupe, Pat Sutton, wound up being hired by them and went over to Austria. And I said, oh, that was a chance of a lifetime, but that's not what fate had in store for me, apparently. It was living in Austria and doing marionette shows or touring the country with their puppets. And then 1968, I was back in college. The puppet show was going to be doing 2 weeks of shows at the Museum of Science and Industry. And they brought in puppeteers from New York. And I said, I'll help train people, but I'm very tied up with school. And these New York puppeteers were just not very good. And we needed another puppeteer, and I said, oh, there's this guy in St. Louis. He makes beautiful puppets. Well, what the heck? So they called in Bob Kramer and got the job, and he was Pinocchio. He became the star of the show. So we worked together for 2 weeks, and then I went to Europe. He went back to St. Louis. And then he kept writing and wanted me to come to St. Louis. And I talked to people, I've played every major legitimate theater in the country, and now I should play shopping centers? That doesn't seem to be a good career move. And people said, well, go down there, learn all you can about building puppets, and then you can just build your own puppets and have your own puppet theater here in Chicago. Oh, great idea. Well, didn't happen. It's 50 years later, I'm still in St. Louis, and it was such... you sometimes say it wouldn't change a thing. It would have been great to change a few things, but the travel we were able to do, the people we met, the places, the experiences we've had, it's just like it was worth every little glitch that there was along the way. It was just in trying to get this to children about, and just heard this the other day somewhere. If you pick a profession that you really love, it's not work. And it's true. It was never, oh, gosh, I've got to go work on puppets. Or, gosh, I've got to do a show. It's like, oh, wow, I can't wait to get down there to work on puppets. I can't wait to do another show. And finding your passion, because money is not the answer. And I think finding your passion came to me very recently, that like your passion is part of who you are. And if you don't know who you are and what you're about, you're not going to have much sympathy for anyone else or anything else. And so, what was it, Shakespeare too? Thine own self be true. It's so true. And if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. And I used to think that was kind of not exactly right. But I see it is true that if you do not have the love within you, how can you give it? you have to have that resource built in. And through puppetry and through workshops and through being with children, trying to pass on some of this information to help them be creative. The world isn't just dollars and cents and this and that. It's heart and soul and texture, and one has to be aware of that. And I think some people naturally are. Some people have to learn. It's like manners. I mean, sadly, we weren't all born with great manners, and lately it seems parents aren't doing much of a job of passing on the idea of good manners or being thoughtful or being kind.
Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for another Doug's Life. A Doug's Life is sponsored by the following.
Started the drama club in high school. Gamma Delta Gamma. It's my imagination. I just came up with Gamma Delta Gamma. I don't know. I'm sure it doesn't mean anything in Greek.
Just kidding. This has been a Southside 2-Bit Studio production.